Okay, real talk. You're splitting a dinner bill, right? Or maybe you're paying a friend back for that concert ticket, or even trying to snag that vintage find on a local marketplace. You whip out your phone, ready to Venmo, and then a nagging thought hits you. Can you even send that much? Is there a magical line in the sand where Venmo just says, "Nope, that's too much money for us"? You've probably wondered, haven't you? Like, what is the actual limit? Is it a fixed number? Does it change? Do they just eyeball it and say, "Yeah, that looks suspicious"? Because let's be honest, we've all been there, that awkward pause before hitting send, wondering if you're about to get a digital slap on the wrist. It's a question that lurks in the back of our minds, especially when those numbers start to climb. We're living in a world of instant transactions, where moving money is as easy as tapping a screen. But with that ease comes a silent, often confusing, set of rules. We all want to know the boundaries, right? We want to avoid the dreaded transaction failed message, especially when you're in a hurry or trying to impress someone. Think about it. We use Venmo for everything. From splitting rent with roommates to buying that limited edition sneaker, to even paying a dog walker. It's woven into our daily lives. But how much can we really trust it for larger transactions? We've all heard those horror stories of accounts getting frozen or payments getting held up for verification. So, the question isn't just about the amount, it's about the security and reliability of the platform. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty numbers, let's unpack why these limits even exist. It's not just Venmo being difficult. It's about protecting both you and them. Think about it. With the ease of digital transactions comes the risk of fraud, money laundering, and all sorts of shady activities. These limits are a safety net, a way to keep things running smoothly and legally. Imagine a world without these limits. Anyone could send or receive massive amounts of money with zero oversight. It'd be a wild west of financial transactions, ripe for exploitation. So, while it might seem like a hassle, these limits are actually a good thing. They're a necessary evil in the digital age. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. What are the actual limits? Well, it's not as simple as a single, fixed number. Venmo's limits are dynamic. They depend on a few key factors, primarily your account verification status. Let's start with the basics. If you have an unverified Venmo account, your sending limit is significantly lower. We're talking a few $100s per week, not thousands. This is a deliberate move by Venmo to encourage users to verify their identities. They need to know who you are to ensure compliance with regulations and to minimize risk. Verification involves linking a bank account, confirming your identity, and sometimes providing additional documentation. It's a bit of a process, but it unlocks higher limits and gives you more flexibility. Once you're verified, you'll see a substantial increase in your sending and receiving limits. Now, here's where it gets a little nuanced. Even with a verified account, Venmo sets weekly sending limits. These limits can vary based on your account activity, your transaction history, and even the type of transaction. Think of it like a credit score, but for Venmo. The more you use the platform responsibly, the more trust you build, and potentially, the higher your limits become. Currently, for most verified users, we're talking about a weekly sending limit in the thousands. But remember, this can fluctuate. Venmo doesn't publicly disclose the exact numbers, and they reserve the right to change them at any time. But what about receiving money? Well, there are also limits on how much you can receive. These limits are generally higher than sending limits, but they're still in place to prevent abuse. Venmo wants to ensure that the platform isn't being used for illegal activities or to move massive amounts of money without proper oversight. And here's another thing to keep in mind, Venmo distinguishes between personal accounts and business accounts. If you're using Venmo for business transactions, you'll have different limits and fees. Venmo offers a business profile specifically designed for small businesses, which comes with its own set of rules and regulations. So, how do you find out your specific limits? The best way is to check your Venmo app. Go to your settings, look for the spending limits or verification section. Venmo will provide you with the most up-to-date information on your account limits. Now, let's talk about those red flags that can trigger Venmo to freeze your account or hold your payments. What are they looking for? Well, sudden spikes in activity, unusually large transactions, or transactions with users who have a history of suspicious activity can all raise red flags. Venmo uses sophisticated algorithms to detect these patterns. If you're suddenly sending or receiving large amounts of money, especially to or from accounts you've never interacted with before, you might trigger a security alert. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can lead to delays or even account freezes. To avoid these issues, it's crucial to use Venmo responsibly. Don't try to game the system. Don't send or receive money for illegal activities. And always verify your account and keep your information up to date. Another key thing to keep in mind is the nature of the transaction. If you're selling goods or services, especially high-value items, use a platform designed for those kinds of transactions. Venmo is primarily designed for peer-to-peer payments, not for large-scale commercial activities. And what about those situations where you need to send or receive a large amount of money? Well, there are alternatives. Bank transfers, wire transfers, and even certified checks are all viable options for larger transactions. Venmo is great for small, everyday payments, but it's not always the best choice for everything. So, to recap, Venmo's limits are dynamic and depend on your account verification status, your transaction history, and the type of transaction. They're in place to protect you and the platform from fraud and abuse. Always verify your account, use Venmo responsibly, and be aware of the alternatives for larger transactions. Ultimately, understanding these limits is about being a savvy digital citizen. We need to be aware of the rules of the road in the digital financial world. We need to understand the safeguards put in place to protect us. Because, at the end of the day, digital transactions are here to stay, and understanding the limits is key to making sure that your money moves safely and efficiently. With that said, thanks for watching and until next time.